So in week 10 of Designing Corporate Communications, we're talking about earning attention and continuing that conversation. One thing I want to speak to now is the question of differentiation, whether you can use a differentiation strategy to distinguish your particular product, your brand, simply through communications, or whether you have to have something more fundamental in terms of differentiation with what you're actually doing product-wise. Now, one of the people I really admire in the world of graphic design and branding, and just more generally, is a guy called Aaron James Straplin, a very influential graphic designer, speaker, who's based in Portland, Oregon. And he's a real champion of the little guy, or the small enterprise, and he, despite having done some work for very famous clients, including the Obama administration and Nike and whatnot, is most proud of some of the things that he's done for people who really couldn't afford to pay him. He very famously said that he's been paid $25,000 to do a logo. He's been paid a burrito. And I find personally his passionate conviction that good graphic design interventions to create a distinctive visual identity for a small business, that this can give them a head start, that it can help them go head to head with the big powerful guys with so much money to spend in an industry, that you can help a lot of people get a start in business with effectively communication design at relatively small cost if you've got a mate like him, a caring guy who loves what he does and wants to help people. So this suggests that good communication design in itself may be a point of differentiation. But is it lipstick on a pig in some cases? Do we have a pretty ordinary product and we try and make it look kind of fancy and just kind of differentiate it, tell a nice story, promote some sense of intangible value there? I hope that's not the case. I hope we start with something fairly substantial, but we hope to engage very busy people in this era of attention scarcity through effective communication design interventions. So let's talk a little further on this and look at a very particular example, just to see how a good brand visualization that goes to the nature of the product as well can help to differentiate a product, a startup business, in a highly contested market. So first of all, let's speak to some of the basic issues of whether you can actually differentiate a generic product with just better communication design. Now, some of the cynics about marketing have long assumed that it was really about just taking a particularly ordinary product and trying to spin it, in a sense, hype it up to get people to pay more than they really should for it. So that sounds a terrible thing if it's actually true. And no doubt plenty of people have tried to do that. They think if you just bring in the graphic designers or bring in the marketers and whatnot, that you can upsell something that is pretty shabby. And, the world is full of that kind of stuff. At the same time, I think we have to take seriously the observation by the very influential, very persuasive, deeply engaging, very intellectual Rory Sutherland, who is vice chairman of Ogilvy in the UK. In the most watched TED Talk ever, he talks about how branding consultants, marketers have a very strong sense of intangible value, that by effectively building effective stories, narratives, images, perceptions around a product, you can actually add more experienced or perceived value to consumers, in a sense, if they buy the story. If they buy into the narrative, if you convince them of the distinctive value of your product, then they will value it even more, even though the inherent attributes of the product haven't actually changed. And he speaks about the notion of placebos, and he says quite explicitly that placebos are really great value. You don't have to go to all the problem of actually developing a medicine, but people take a harmless tablet and they seem to work. They think they work. They feel better. So everyone's a winner, isn't it? Well, this kind of placebo approach to product promotion is something that lots of people hope to do. The idea that if you just simply convince people that the product is better than it really is, you create this intangible value or component, then they'll be prepared to pay a higher price. It sounds like you're ripping people off, but if they actually genuinely believe it and get satisfaction from it, then why not? Well, okay, even if we could do that, and I think unless you actually have a lot to work with, people are pretty cynical these days, so I don't think those kind of tricky upsells and spin are going to work. But even if you could, ultimately, if people buy into the story, but then the product experience doesn't align with that story, they're going to be disillusioned. You're going to get caught out. So as I say here in the slides, effectively the product experience needs to align with and reinforce the promotional message. So this has to happen first of all at the basic level of the product interfaces. You know, the visual identity, the signage around the product, the packaging, the very feel of it, the materiality. And say if it's a service experience, say in a hotel, the fundamental spatiality of it. And any kind of service experience, the staff have to embody the brand identity. You can't position your brand as luxe, for example, and then give people really, really shabby service. Okay. Of course, when people are consuming a product, committing to a product, signing up for a product, sometimes they pay for it afterwards, you know, such as a hotel or something. But if they're actually signing up for a product, picking a particular provider, for example, of a hotel service or whatever, through an online interface, more and more of these online interfaces are very strongly visual in their capabilities. So you're going to have a very good sense of visual representation. What this means is that this presents a great opportunity to actually communicate your very distinctive aesthetic, ethos, visuality. But at the same time, if you don't do it well, it's going to look kind of shabby. And if people then directly experience the product that doesn't accord with the visual representations, they're going to be dissatisfied. And this is all the more important in these kind of sites because so many of the major intermediaries through which we consume services or buy products, for example, Amazon, for example, they have review mechanisms. So that you book a hotel through booking.com, and you do so largely based on the images of the property, and then you get there and find that all those lovely pictures of those nicely renovated funky rooms are off in another tower that you're not staying in, and you're in the unrenovated, 1980s horror, then you're going to be dissatisfied. And I think many of us have had these experiences of looking at reviews, and so often people say, it looking like nothing that I saw in the picture. The pictures online look nothing like the room I ended up in. And then they told me that that was the particular premium room or whatever, and they tried to upsell it to me at a huge price. So there's going to be a lot of dissatisfaction there. So let's actually look at one example of a hotel here in a very competitive hotel market, just to see how good visual comm, communications, and a broader visual identity around the product experience, the inherent attributes, the material attributes of the product, the hotel the one stays in, how that suggests that a differentiation strategy can work. And then we'll consider about why we so often don't see differentiation. Why do we see so many products all kind of looking like other products in the same industry? Because there are some interesting economic rationales why very often we don't see product differentiation. But this first, just a single kind of random case study, not entirely random because it's a hotel I stayed in and it struck me as an interesting example, and I grabbed some little fragments from the experience, including somewhere the note paper, which is pretty cool. So I've got some here in the office. Went looking for it and couldn't find it, but anyway, it's depicted anyway in the photos I got. So anyway, the market I want to show you is the hotel market in Tel Aviv in Israel. Now this is the map interface that you get if you're looking at booking.com. So you want to book a hotel, and if you go into a place like Tel Aviv, as you can see, every one of these little blue upside down teardrops, I guess, every single one of those represents a hotel. And no surprise, the hotels are clustered all near the beach, okay, by the sea. Right on the Mediterranean. Tel Aviv is a remarkably good city. You've got great coffee, great bookshops, great art, cultural institutions. You see the Tel Aviv Museum of Art there, for example. Walking distance from the beach. That's a very unusual thing to find. A world-class beach next to world-class food, next to world-class art. Okay, and a generally interesting place. So we look at the map here. You can see most of the hotels have anticipated a desire to be near the beach. So they're clustered there. And this is a very nice data visualization, by the way, with booking.com. You can immediately see which hotels are not available for the particular dates that you put in. So they're colored in that kind of, rosy red color there. And so all the ones that are white are still available. What that means, though, is that if you're running a little boutique hotel, you're up against a lot of properties. You're up against the Hilton, a whole bunch of other major chains, some really classy and quite expensive boutique hotels, and then you're up against a whole bunch of other smaller properties as well. So how do you cut through? Okay. Well, one thing you can do is, of course, to have a very distinctive visual identity for your property, for the hotel itself. Okay, and then to depict that effectively through images that you're going to put on booking sites such as booking.com. And this was a hotel that I found on booking.com. I hadn't actually heard about it before. And then when I spoke to someone I was going to be meeting in Tel Aviv and asked me where I was going to stay, and I said, oh yeah, right, okay, that's a seriously hipster place that you're going to stay there. Mind you, I did see some quite a number of years ago in Tel Aviv some graffiti which said, hipsters suck, and then someone else wrote, hipsters are dead, and then someone else wrote, hipsters are back. Okay, hipster Mark II. So anyway, these are kind of hipster Mark II. I think that the great graphic designer Aaron James Straplin, this place would kind of resonate with him very much, actually. In fact, probably the folks behind this, I suspect, might be influenced by his work, actually. Anyway, they share a common love of caps and beards. What more kind of hipster new creative economy can you get than this? Anyway, this is a little hotel, bit back from the beach, and they've clearly pitched it in a way which is very on trend for a subsection of the market. They've got a very distinct segment here and a very strong visual identity. So it's the Dave Hotel, okay, and it's part of the Brown Hotel Group. This is the Dave West. I presume it's the Dave East somewhere. I'm not quite sure. I haven't really quite checked it out. But anyway, so it's obviously pretty retro. Lots of found objects. Indeed, I sent a couple of pictures from when I stayed here to my mum, who showed them to my dad, and knowing full well that my dad would say, "God, it looks like a flea market. How much are you paying for that?" Because I knew he wouldn't quite get it, but in a jovial kind of way. So nice decor, and as with a lot of boutique hotels these days, every single room is actually differentiated. Okay, so you don't quite know what you're going to get visually till you actually check in, which is a nice element of surprise. And of course, there is the graphical design interface has been well thought out, right down to the collaborations with the boutique body wash, hand soap, shampoo, conditioner, and of course you can buy those as souvenirs down in the funky kind of lobby. Okay, so there's lots of found retro objects. The note paper there, hey you, okay, take your notes with an old style pencil. Pencils are cool again, okay. And there's something kind of nice about sharpening a pencil, very tactile, very kind of analog, okay. And again, clever text. So the luggage, dirty clothes bag here says, the most memorable days end with the dirtiest clothes. Okay, this is a bit of a different spin from what you normally get with those kind of bland business hotels. Okay, and you can see it's a bit back from the beach, and it has this slightly kind of DIY feel. It wasn't super cheap. It wasn't super expensive either. It was a bit premium priced, but I felt that you were getting a very distinctive experience, and the staff were really funky, very relaxed, and it was a nice place to be. So, of course, when you go traveling, you find so many places like this in the COVID context and whatnot. It's actually kind of frustrating to hear these stories. Imagine if, the days when we were just free to roam, and so many of these kind of businesses have been doing it really tough. But I think the clear implication here is that if you have a distinctive sensibility and you know that that will resonate with people, and then you bring some combination of good interior design and very good graphical design to build a cohering visual identity, you have a very distinctive point of differentiation that you can sell. Okay, so if you're targeting a very distinctive market segment where you know that's going to resonate with a distinctive product, you can get a really deeply engaged customer base. At the same time, you have to deliver on the product's purpose. Some company that isn't doing very well in its generic hotel business suddenly thinks, oh, there's a bit of a kind of a creative hipster market out there, and some of these folks, they've got pretty high income as well too. So let's do some hipster hotels. If it's quite silly in the sense of not really deeply informed by the aesthetics and the values of your target market, then it's not going to be quite right, and people will discern that there's a little bit of faking it but not really making it as well, and that might lead to actually disproportionately higher dissatisfaction, because one of the old rules of services marketing is undersell the product and over-deliver, not the other way around. And the great danger, of course, in the attention economy, when you're fighting so much to get attention, is that you do exactly the opposite. That you make grand claims up front, you offer some really exciting, very distinctive, or not distinctive, just very good value proposition, but then don't have the capability to deliver on that. Okay, so the critical thing here is kind of under-promise and oversell. Always leave some pleasant surprises. And you think about it, how often do you get pleasant surprises in life? Most of the surprises we get are actually kind of negative surprises. By the way, that's a good hint on relationships. You want to make a relationship last? Make sure you deliver some pleasant surprises. Don't be always dropping the bad surprises. So anyway, we can see that in this case, and so many others that you'd know, that with strong visual and communications tools that we have these days, with digital design, digital communications, social media platforms, all these digital intermediaries for selling goods and services, you'd think that clearly so many more businesses should be engaged in an active differentiating strategy, okay? And with the tactics that come out of that. So historically, why haven't companies done this? We do know, historically there have always been kind of quirky, interesting, distinctive places that people seek out. These days, of course, it's easier to find them, and so you think there'd be even more of them. I think we have to go back and ask ourselves historically, though, why differentiation was rather less common than we might imagine, and why still in so many fields it seems that all the products kind of look like each other and nothing really has a kind of wow factor, okay? Well, the first thing to keep in mind is that in the absence of really good information, differentiation is very risky, okay? You really need to know, as I say down the bottom, which is the conclusion, but we'll jump down there and then we'll come back to it again, that if you're going to do niche market strategies, you really need a good knowledge of, oops, there's a T missing, the he market segment, no, not the he, the she, the market segment, and the product has to be just right with effective messaging. So I say that you need an apt sensibility, a segment apt sensibility, okay? And what this means is that unless you're really deeply in the subculture, it's very, very difficult to develop the product and the messaging to actually sell to a distinctive subculture. It can sometimes be the case that you do something based on your own very distinctive sensibility. You just kind of put it out in the market in this really eccentric way, and it happens to resonate that people like it. As is often the case in the creative industries, there is a bit of this nobody knows things. You just put it in the market and see how it goes. What we do know there is that you normally need a portfolio of creative works, because you never quite know what's going to hit and what's going to miss. If this is your one shot at a business, though, you're creating a coffee shop, you're starting a boutique hotel, or whatever you're doing, you can't afford to just be completely eccentric and hope that people will get it, okay? For the most part, people want the confidence that this is going to resonate with a particular market segment. And historically, a lot of businesses haven't done that. They didn't have the full range of market analytics, the data sources that we have these days that can help to drive insights into different potential market segments there. They weren't able to look at levels of engagement, for example, with digital media. When you send something out on a social media platform, although actually the engagement rates tend to be very low in general, and we've got a link to that, so you can see that you might only get say 5% or 3% even engagement with stuff you're putting out there, even to people even following you. So that sense suggests how difficult it is. But over time, you can get a sense of who's connecting and get some feedback and build a pretty good picture of what is going to resonate in terms of aesthetics, values, desires, experiences, and whatnot by particular target segments. So without that information, companies tended to err on the side of caution. And this has been explored by economists for literally over 100 years. The great economist Harold Hotelling, way back in 1929, published a very influential article, which is still referred to very often by economists today, that explained the economic logic of minimum differentiation. And he started off with talking about the spatiality of cities and why you got two stores that were selling pretty much the same stuff, like kind of locating next to each other. Why weren't they actually further apart, as would be in some respects more socially efficient? And he started off with the example of a street and two stores selling the same stuff, and they tend to be side by side, smack bang in the middle of the street, because it wasn't rational for one store to be up the other end of the street because a larger part of the market would be in a closer walking distance to the other one, so they tend to locate next to each other. And so that was a kind of a spatial metaphor, which has turned out to be very illuminating in so many markets. It's understood very much in politics, how we see political parties tend to merge their policies, not merge, converge, sorry, their policies tend to converge towards the median voter. We see this in things like fast foods. Burger King and McDonald's seem to be in a competition to look like each other, in a way. In so many areas where functionality is a key driver of consumer choice, such as in basic white goods, refrigerators, washing machines, things like that, we see a quite striking degree of convergence. And so that is one of those things I think you sometimes experience. You go into a store and you're saying, well, there's so much to buy, but nothing I want. Okay, why is everyone making all of their product look exactly the same? Okay, and economists over time have built very good models and done very good analyses with a lot of very rich data on the market conditions under which you tend to get greater variance or not. So Hotelling, for example, made the point that sometimes you actually get greater variation serving a wider variety of market segments, actually under conditions of near monopoly, for the very simple reason that even a monopolist might be fat and lazy and unresponsive in some ways. That if unless it may be a perfect monopoly and they can shake people down, or sometimes even theoretically, even a full monopoly would do this, they're looking to maximize profits. So they might actually have a wider range of product to appeal to everyone, particularly when there's vertical differentiation, vertical segmentation in terms of what people are prepared to pay. And if you think about this, monopoly railway providers, they've, JR's, the regular train, and they've got the Gurinsha as well. So for people who would be prepared to pay a premium. And so this makes, a whole lot of sense there. So very often too, when there is a very fragmented market, you're going to get people pursuing niche strategies. Just simply, there may be technological constraints or whatever, a whole lot of constraints, which means that it's not quite possible to kind of serve the larger market anyway, so you might as well go for a particular niche that's a more comfortable place to operate. It's kind of in between, where there's an oligopoly, where it's kind of stable, there's a certain number of players in the market, not monopoly, not a very fragmented market. People tend to all chase the same kind of median consumer, and things get sort of boring then, okay? So we need to take very seriously the market conditions under which differentiation doesn't happen that frequently. It's not that no one's ever heard of the concept and these large companies are all just kind of, dull-witted. Now, arguably though, digital transformation has made it a lot easier to go and detect sub-segments or new segments or sub-markets there that if you deliver the right kind of product, people would be prepared to pay a significant premium. So some of the most innovative companies these days are actually going out there and trying to find potentially neglected areas of consumer value that they can pitch to. But of course, they have to have the product to do that. And so just to conclude, where I've already covered once, but to reiterate this, the idea of faking it till you make it. In a digital era, you're even more likely to get caught out than in the past, okay? So you may be able to identify that there is a segment there. You may have some really great data analytics, unprecedentedly good data analytics. But in the end, you have to deliver on the brand promise that you've got there. And of course, you have to be able to communicate effectively to them in the first place, but let's assume you can do that. But everything has to align. And that goes to the heart of our understanding of the expansive notion of branding, that it isn't lipstick on a pig, okay? That this is about a value proposition that you're making to a particular audience with the appropriate messaging, but then you're doing everything that needs to be done with your organization to effectively align your organization and your product and your service experience with the promise that you're making to the market as a whole. So it becomes quite a comprehensive challenge for an organization to become what you actually say you are, or to continue to be at least what you say you are, because arguably organizations tend to decline over time unless they're actually facing competitive disciplines. So let's take the positive thing and say they find a new segment and they see the growth. Very often they have to grow into that opportunity and do it fast, but aiming to be quite authentic in terms of the value proposition that they're presenting to a market, and an increasingly differentiated value proposition.